New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. And hello again, dear ones. Dr. Robert with you over here.
Rev Z right here.
And Tracy Brown over here dancing to the theme music.
I love it when our guests are dancing to the music. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. Happens every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. Thank you for being with us. Those in the know that it's the last day for the Santa Cap. Santa Cap goes back in the bucket after the last broadcast of the evening. After prayer time tonight, the Santa Cap goes back in the bucket, and tomorrow is the new year, so no worries there. Welcome aboard. Thanks for being with us, folks. Let us know where you are, where you're from in the chat box as we go along, and we want to welcome to the program the most esteemed, the most amazing. I'm going to just like lay accolades on you all day long here. Tracy Brown is in the house. And I went back and I looked around. I could have swore we had you on this program at some point, but I couldn't find a recording in the archives. And I'm like, so I feel woefully unprepared to build up what you said last time you were here.
Oh, that's great, because whatever I said the last time probably has no bearing on what we talked about today.
Well, that is perfect. I love it. So speaking of which, hey Z, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I thought today would be an interesting interlude of doing as Tracy's sun is setting there. I think we do a sunset on 2024 and kind of move into a sunrise, if you will, on 2025, looking at new thought and new thought leadership as we move into a new kind of environment, a new kind of rules of the road, if you will, and try to figure out how to navigate.
Yeah, sounds like a great idea. It is. I find it is quite auspicious that we plan to have you here on New Year's Eve, and rather than ducking out and not doing a show today, it was a divine inspiration to have you with us here, Tracy. So I'm grateful again that you're here, and let's jump in from there. Is the sun set, as the sun is setting on 2024, what do you see that maybe this movement or the various organizations, or what's been the accomplishment in 2024? What have we accomplished as a philosophy, as a movement?
So it's interesting that you would phrase the question in that way, because I was thinking, as the sun is setting, what have been the biggest challenges in 2024 versus the great achievements of 2024. But I have kind of both now going on in my mind. And I think that in one of the things that really stands out for me when I think about the people I've talked to in Unity and INTA and AGNT and CSL and UFBL, right? All throughout the movement. One of the challenges, one of the successes, actually, or accomplishments, has been the fact that we realize COVID and the pandemic is over, or, there's always illness, but the crisis of it is over. And we know we have to rebuild. So I think that's an achievement, because I think there were a lot of people in denial. Oh, well, it'll be over and then we'll be back to normal. And it's like, no, the acceptance that there's not, the old normal is not ever going to be normal again. And the second thing that comes to mind that I think is a big landmark for all of us in New Thought is the bringing together of so many of the African descent together, coming together in August, being together in person, coming away from that with a renewed energy and with new networks and with a true recognition of the impact that Black people have had in all areas of New Thought in the past, and being clear about the potential to lead in this movement going forward. So those are the two things that really come to mind.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. One of the things that stick out to me is the idea of cultural relevance, right? How do we take these teachings that were primarily for whites, I'll just say that way, and the culture that has developed around it has not only been that, but it's also been somewhat of affluency. And so how do we adjust that culture to be more inclusive of those that are not, coming from that environment? If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw, I had the great pleasure to be at Celebrating Our Soul this past summer, as I know both of you were, and what a great experience. And number one, to be, I don't always know the most appropriate way to say it, but for me to be the minority in the room and not just be in that place of it's okay that others practice or perceive the practice in this way, in a different way than I do, but to be actually in the practice with people and to really not just be watching, but participating to the best of my ability. And recognizing, just as you were saying, Tracy, that the cultural significance that people of African descent have brought to this philosophy, because you're right, Z, it was almost entirely white to get started, right? And we have our history and our stories of earnest fighting for the quote Black churches to be better recognized, and all these. We can see how we've progressed. I want to trust that we're willing to continue that work as well, and that it's a little bit more of a yes, we can together type of work, rather than, oh, I got to do that, or the, hey, come on, get a part of it. I don't want us begging for people to come be a part of a greater movement. So yeah, there I am.
Oh, well, interestingly enough, on today's episode of The Inclusive Church, noon Mountain Time on Tuesdays on the New Thought Media Network, today I was talking about the the four most compelling reasons to be strategically or intentionally inclusive in our spiritual communities. And when I was talking about those, one of the things that I shared was, so often when we say we want to be inclusive, we then go on to describe what that means. That, oh, people who are different from us will come and they will fit in. They will come and they will adapt to how we already are because we're comfortable the way we are. We like the way we are. And when we are truly committed to being inclusive, what we realize is that everyone has to make some adjustments, including the people who have been in the majority in the past. Because if you are truly inclusive, you're bringing in different perspectives, different needs, different cultural ways of expressing, different ways of recognizing and then resolving conflict. There are different interests. And so whether it's by race or whether it's by sexual orientation or gender identity, or whether it's by age group or any other way that a group of people are different from what is the current norm or assumption, then everybody has to be looking for, how do we build a bridge? Not how do you just come across the bridge to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that because it makes me think about, sorry, Robert, it makes me think about this idea that we talk about a lot called interfaith dialogues. But I think we flipped the script on that and talk about in faith, in New Thought faith, if you will. We need to begin to have a dialogue with the different aspects of the global community to understand, you know, what does New Thought mean to me as a Black male from the South, with a whole bunch of other stuff thrown in. And so you have the homogeneous part, right? The big group, but then within that, you still have to understand some nuances for regional and that kind of stuff, which for me is what we talk about when we talk about inner anything dialogue. Is how do I look at this whole thing and begin to talk to the different parts or constituencies or cultural expressions to make sure that I'm inclusive, right? Because one of the things that I think everybody's going to face, as you were saying, Tracy, is how do we begin to create an environment where people feel included and not just accepted, if you will. May not be the right term, but yeah, we will accept you, but we're not going to, you may not be included in decision makings and how we shape the environment and so forth. So I'll stop there.
You're allowed to be here. And we feel good about the fact that we are allowing you in. We are welcoming you in. We feel great about that. As long as you do not give me any feedback or any indication that the way I'm communicating or worshiping or teaching or inviting is not comfortable for you. That's your problem, that you're not comfortable, right? Versus really, all of us should be uncomfortable if we're navigating and creating something new together.
This all reminds me of a conversation I had pre-pandemic with a minister, and at the time, I don't hear this term very much anymore, actually, but at the time there was a real push to be radically inclusive, and the story as it was shared with me was that isn't as easy as just saying we are. That isn't easy at all, actually, in practice. And it's and it kind of dovetails for me in a conversation I think I heard on your show a couple weeks ago, Tracy. I know it was your show, about the word belonging. and that same concept of belonging that I think in some ways New Thought recognize that, well, radically inclusive is kind of a high bar to reach, and we're not going to get there, and it's not really all that comfortable with it to begin with, let's just say. So can we make this a little softer? And I think we sort of settled into this sense of, okay, well, let's create a space of belonging, a space where people can belong. But I think, and I'd love to hear you share a little bit more on it again, that can get lost, that sense of belonging and the use of the term and the understanding of the ideal.
Well, the short version is I'm not totally against belonging, but we have to be more conscious about how we use it and intentional. So belonging as a concept is great because that tends to mean partnership and, everyone's involved. But what happens that makes it a problem is that it's very easy in our languaging to go into ownership. And in fact, I have had a couple of ministers say to me that, no, we want people to know that, they belong to each other. No, we don't belong to each other. At least in our social construct in the US, there are, and actually in Africa, in the Caribbean, in all the places around the world where there are people of color, there have been white societies that colonized them. And so this whole idea of any person can belong to another person is very troublesome for many people who are are representing communities and cultures of color. Because when white people just say, I belong to you and you belong to me, it brings up an entire, very vivid and not that far away history of people who are white saying, no, you belong to me because you are my colony. Or I am the slave owner and you are enslaved. You are my property. And so you belong to me. So things like that, like they can be so subtle and you don't even realize that you had 10 people who visited your community and you're saying, we belong to each other and there's a sense of ownership and they don't come back. Right. And we had the best intentions, but we're not aware and we're not talking to people who could actually give us that input or feedback. So, that has become over the last few years, both in corporations as well as in spiritual communities, that typically the folks are excited about we belong to each other or white. And now, there are a couple of communities that I will say they've done a good job of using belonging because they're aware of the language and they have made sure that people in leadership roles or people on the platform do not slip and say, you belong to me or I belong to you.
Right.
But that's education, right? That's clarity. And then you have to educate people so they don't go on automatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that includes, and I want to just say it explicitly so that it's in the room, if you will, is that includes our young engagement, our youth engagement, right? How do we make them feel engaged in their nomenclature, in their environment, and as they might say, in their vibe, so that they begin to look at these teachings as something that's not only appealing, but something that's relevant, right?
Yeah.
And that appealing and relevance will cross all bounds. But I just want to speak into the room, the youth engagement and involvement, because I think across all religious context, regardless, New Thought or other, this idea of young people being involved is dwindling.
Yes. And that even the belonging piece, again, if you are in a spiritual community and the majority of people are 50, 60, 70, and are in their 80s, but 50 and over, and I'm someone who's 25, even if I was raised in New Thought, at the age of 25, if people are saying, if the older people are saying that I belong to them, no, that's not going to work, right? But creating together a sense of belonging where my input as a 25-year-old or as a 30-year-old is part of the conversation, and I get to help shape what we do, when we do it, how we do it, how we talk about it. That's a different goal. So we just have to be
To me, it seems it comes back so often. So much of this comes back to listen more and engage more. Listen more deeply and engage more people, and decentralize the leadership. Get more people involved in, because you're not going to learn this if you're just sitting in the pews on Sundays and maybe Wednesday nights. You're not really going to get this if you're just watching the Sunday broadcast. And so much of this happens in the learning moments and the teaching moments and the moments of engagement that happen when we're doing other things.
Yeah.
There's
it requires a certain amount of focus, right?
I would say so, yeah.
Yes, it does. And I think we mean well. I do. I think that people mean well. And as we look at 2024 and the sun setting, I think we can acknowledge that people mean well, and in 2025 we have to do well, right? So let's go from awareness and get beyond guilt and blame and shame and fear, so that we can move into new actions that actually demonstrate commitment, not just interest.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you make me think about football. Of course, I always have to go back to football. But but you know, I could have all the enthusiasm and everything about being the quarterback, but if I don't have the skills to be the quarterback, I should not be the quarterback. Now, you put me somewhere else on the field. You or maybe just use my enthusiasm on the sideline. I don't know, but I definitely should not be, because I am enthusiastic and I'm a rah rah or whatever. I should not be put in a position because it's a feel good. I'm making people feel good and pumping them up. But when I'm actually called to do the actual work of that position, I can't throw the ball 10 yards, let alone throw a Hail Mary down the field at the end of the game. So in that same context, I think we have to begin to look at how we as leaders and congregants position ourselves and put ourselves, as you said, not in a position just to feel good or talk good, but do good in a position and do what's required. I'm sorry about the football.
No, I like the football. I think it's a great analogy. There's a video of a young man who who was awarded the top prize for an annual Martin Luther King speech competition that is held or used to be held here in Dallas. And his name is Sherman Dalton, in case anybody wants to like go on YouTube really quick and find it. The Sherman Dalton, he was maybe 8 years old or 9 years old, and he did a speech. And the theme was that year was based on Martin Luther King's speech, drum major speech. And there is a line in his talk, in his little 5-minute speech, near the end, where he said something like, if you're a drum major, but nobody is following you, then you just somebody dancing and acting a fool on the football field. Be out there and you can be looking good and you can be like, got on the uniform and smiling. But if you look behind you and nobody is following you, then yeah, you're just a fool dancing on the field. And so I think that we have, I think some of it's human nature, could be an observation, but not an excuse. That we have people with leadership roles throughout our movement who are there because of personality or celebrity or, not because they have the skills to be in the position they're in.
Right.
And then that creates a lot of frustration. When I say leader, I'm not just talking about ministers, although I do observe in New Thought that we tend to assume ministers, by nature of the title, know everything. Will be good at everything, anything they want to do.
And they have their shit together.
And that's scary because number one, it's not true. And number two, then what happens is people get into roles that they're actually not qualified for.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't do what we're talking about. They're not by nature inclusive, partly because they're protecting. They don't want people to know what they don't know. And so they don't reach out and involve people who do have the skills or the experience or, the input that would be helpful.
Right. And I think part of that is that fear that I'm not good enough and somebody will find out. And I think that it happens that people end up in positions they know they're not qualified for. But you wouldn't admit that in this movement either. No one would say, no, I don't think I really have the now. And part of that is the teaching, right? Part of that is our teaching that we do have the ability and the capability and through the power of our mind. And yes, I could learn to be a great pastoral care minister, and that truly isn't me. And if you hire me for that position, nobody's going to have it. We have countless examples of that I see in the New Thought movement of ministers that for one reason or another don't make it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
In their individual ministry, as well as in looking at stepping into leadership for any of the denominations or larger groupings of ministry. I think it does happen. And I think for me, two come to mind. One thing that comes to mind is I think about leadership positions I've been in, but the difference, and for me, the difference is I'm pretty quick to say, I want to talk to 15 people who can tell me more versus I think I'm supposed to personally know exactly what the answer is or what to do. Like I want to talk to 3 people who've done it before. I want to talk to 3 people who have ideas. I want to go talk to 3 people who I can trust to say you're out of your league and here are people I know. I want to tap into their network. So maybe that's also why I noticed others don't engage people who might be able to help them be successful.
Right.
Then the second thing that just flashed through my mind related to that is, this is, I think, for me, why one of the reasons I'm using the phrase we have a crisis in leadership in and I've been really thinking about, what is mine to do, or what can I do to help shift that in 2025 and 2026. Because if we don't groom, grow, strengthen leadership skills, not just managing projects or people, but leadership, then it's going to be really challenging for us to and grow. And I see this in every aspect. There are a couple of exceptions, but I see it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And we're woefully over time, folks, to give our guest a break to take a sip of water and our sponsors a chance to say hello. So we are going to take just a quick moment or so to say hello to some of the people that make all of this happen and give Dr. Tracy a sip of water. But please don't go away. Stay with us because we're going to talk about this when we get back. Is there a crisis in leadership in New Thought? And what do we do about it? How do we move forward if we can see the cracks forming in the foundation, so to speak, or that's not the best analogy, but the windows might have been left open. Let's put it that. We're going to go to break. We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us here on the New Thought Media Network. This is New Thought Today.
New Thought Media Network proudly presents the 2025 season for Nonviolence Meditation Series, January 31st through April 4th. Embrace nonviolence every day with our 64 unique video meditations. Join us at 6 a.m. Mountain Time or watch anytime on our YouTube channel. Featuring a collection of New Thought voices, the 2025 season for Nonviolence Meditation Series. Only on New Thought Media Network, January 31st through April
4th. Join our celebration of Black History Month. Only on New Thought Media Network. New videos every day at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, or watch anytime on our YouTube channel. 28 unique Black History moments. Every day in February. Come join us as we celebrate Black History Month. Only on New Thought Media Network.
And we're back with more of New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. Dr. Robert here, my co-host, Reverend Elzia Sekou, and our dear friend, Dr. Tracy Brown is with us today. And so, all right, I opened a can of worms before the break, I think, but what the heck, I did it. So we got to figure it out. Is the foundation cracked, or did we just leave the windows open?
Or both.
I'll climb in the window, out the window first.
Okay.
I think that the foundational teachings are sound. I think the application of those and the articulation of that foundation has not been modified, for lack of a better word, for a new environment, a new participant, a new set of engagement rules, and new ways to travel the road, right? And so I think we have to shore up the foundation. I think the foundation is good. We got to put up some new walls and take out some windows and put in some new windows and new doors to that foundation to upgrade the house, if you will.
I'll call that a punt. Dr. Tracy, you want to field that one while we're on the.
Well, I agree. The philosophy itself, the teachings themselves, are universal, are all grounded on universal spiritual principles. They are not going to change. They're universal, right? They're spiritual. So yeah, I agree that the challenge comes in who is interpreting and what are they teaching and how are they teaching it? How are they living it? How are they modeling it? And that is what shifts, but the teaching doesn't change. So or the message, the principle doesn't change. And we have, my observation is that yes, there has been hesitance, if not flat out refusal, to modernize the way that we engage people and who we engage as well. And I can't say that without adding this little piece. There have always been, well, there have always been women throughout the history of New Thought who have been heralded as leaders and followed, but they have not always been the ones who've been featured. And the same would be true based on race in the US. There have been people who were influential leaders or writers or practitioners or ministers or chaplains or licensed unity teachers. You're right, we can go back into and find people in the 1930s and in the 1940s and in the 1950s, but for some reason they don't show up in courses, that official courses that we teach, or certifications or books or the magazine, right? Some reason. And we've just gotten to the point with the demographics in not only the US, but throughout the globe, where that simply is not acceptable.
I agree. It is no longer acceptable. And truthfully, I don't think it was ever truly acceptable that we have allowed it to get to this point where we have in many ways whitewashed the history of New Thought. Here's part of what I find difficult. It's difficult for me to separate the people from the organization. People end up in spots where maybe they don't, where maybe they do know the harm they're doing and maybe they don't know, where they're being good stewards, following the way it's written, following the way it's always been. In some way, and I think New Thought, if we look at the organizations, the older the organization, the more stuff they've got and baggage that's being brought along. The younger organizations would appear to be doing a little bit better currently, both in attracting newer people and financially in other ways, doing better a little bit, right? Yes, obviously, always always room for so much more progress. But it seems like the younger organizations stepped into a more modern way of doing things. And I trust that here at New Thought Media Network, being one of the young boys, the young kids on the block, as it were, organizationally, we can learn from all that has come before us to be able to say, we don't do it that way. We want to do it a little differently. And with what time we have left here today, I would love to explore, the three of us, the opportunities that this crisis provides us, or a vision for how we can use this crisis to propel the movement forward. I lose no faith that New Thought, this is our time. This is the biggest opportunity this movement has ever faced to truly support, influence, buoy, however we want to say it, modern evolutionary culture. How do we let go of these anchors and all this baggage to be New Thought in the next half century?
Yeah, you know, I like that because it brings to mind for me this movie that I saw, 6888, over the holidays, by Tyler Perry, about the first all black, and matter of fact, I think it's the only all black women's unit that served in Europe during World War II. And it looks at old thought patterns of what they would be able to do, what could they accomplish, what kind of leadership could they provide to get an enormous task. And I hope I'm not spoiling it for anybody, but they had like 17 million pieces of mail that had not been delivered on both sides of the water. And they were given 6 months to move into a dilapidated building, so forth, so on. Were the leadership skeptical of them doing it? They made it challenging for them to do it. And so I don't think anybody is consciously in our movement, putting roadblocks in front of people so that they can accept leadership. But I think in the back of their minds, there are some lingering thoughts about what certain people can and cannot do, and are they qualified, so forth and so on, to do it. And I think that has to be brought to the day of light so we can look at it. I mean, because we all come to the table with certain prejudices or ways of looking at. I was born and raised in the South in the 50s and the 60s. There's certain things that you're just not going to get out of me, right? Because I've lived a different kind of experience and experienced a different kind of interaction that, to be honest, is not always easy to put that to the background. But I do have the courage and the responsibility to be aware of that, so that when I'm engaged and I feel myself getting out of sorts, I have to say, why is that? Is that an old behavior, an old habit, or what? And we have to constantly do that as leaders, so that we not only stay fresh in what's currently happening, but to also humble ourselves and check ourselves, especially as ministers. Because I was shocked to find out, Tracy, that I didn't know everything. I mean, I thought I knew everything. And I minister. I mean, come on.
Right. You right. We're licensed as a minister, and that of course means that
that was the promise.
You're the closest thing, that they're closest to God, and all of the stereotypes are things that we assume, that we don't even really consciously recognize that we assume.
Right.
But I love what you said, and for me, what that translates into, number one, we've got to let go of stereotypes. Right, we've got to let go of the stereotypes, and that in in 6888. It was just so obvious what the stereotypes were that people were using, people who were in leadership roles were using to assume and then to get in the way and stop the actual success. And luckily, it couldn't be stopped ultimately. And that, I think we can use that as a model. So anybody who hasn't watched 6888 yet, please go watch it, because a lot of us are going to be referring to it all throughout 2025. But the other things that come to mind related to that, so yeah, we let go of the stereotype, but it goes back to something that for a while was a mantra for me. Like, if we're leading, we have to lead from principle, from spiritual principle, not from human personality, right? Principle, not personality. And I think if we do that, that will make a big difference. Although H.B. Jeffrey did remind us in the book Principles of Healing that many of us are operating from principle. We think we're operating from principle when we're really operating from prejudice. So that's a whole nother conversation. And then the third thing that comes to mind for me is in 2025 to really focus on skill development. So let's say anyone is moved into a leadership role, and I'm thinking about this at the individual community level. Someone is, people who are on the board for that ministry, or people who are the team or leader or coordinator for greeters or hospitality, right? As well as on a larger scale, people who are appointed to or elected into leadership roles. Actually, if people don't have the skills, it's our responsibility to give them opportunities to learn and develop the skills that are required so they don't have to hide behind some kind of bravado or falsity. Then let's create opportunities to teach the skills that are needed. We in New Thought, one final thing, because I don't want to lose it again. I thought of it before and lost it. We in New Thought, we teach. Look at the conditions. Don't get stuck in them. And then have a new thought. Right? Choose a new belief, and then create the things that move to that new. We are more trained than most people to move into something new, but we haven't been doing that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't believe we've been truly doing that. And I love what you're saying about, right? It is our responsibility if we promote somebody to leadership and they say, I don't have the skills, or it becomes evident, hopefully not painfully evident, but it becomes evident they don't have the skills, to give them the opportunities to learn those skills, to acquire those skills. You spoke about, and I love that, right? It's principle over personality. Unfortunately, it would appear that many of the people that get the votes vote with the personality more so than necessarily the principle or what's really overall the next great step. I don't want to call it. It's a tricky balance from my experience of what I've seen. And again, so we end up with people in roles that perhaps are not fully qualified, and then act out of that fear. So we've got to find that way, to me, how to balance or to recognize that it's a both and in the personality piece. And because I heard a call recently where someone implored someone else lead us. Like, it was so painfully obvious that they felt the leader was not leading, and not out of malice and not out of inability, just whatever, like that cry that says, we want to follow. And people inherently want to follow a personality, someone that believes, someone that's out front, and really, and I look over the past in some leaderships that I thought people would be great. They just weren't the personality that was necessary for the moment, I think.
And it is, I think, I love that you said both and, because at the same time, any of us, if we're looking for someone to fill a slot, like in our individual community, let's just look at it at that level for a minute. Then we're going to be like, oh, well, this person was in that class I taught last year. And, I think they really have the potential, and they said some really wise things. And so I'm going to go tap them. I don't know 10 other people in my community who might even be better because I haven't interacted with them yet. And so part of our job as leaders is to make sure that we're constantly and consistently interacting with new people or people that we don't know as well, so that we can have a broader pool from which to select, or if we don't do that, then before we promote or appoint or elect anyone, then we make a point to get input about people we don't know, versus just saying, well, I know Elzia, and yeah, he's pretty good. So yeah, he might not be perfect for this, but he'll do okay.
You can have a show. You can have your own show. Go ahead.
Yeah. And the thing here, there's that concept of leading from the back, right? Where the leader does not always have to be out front, or the person that is the actual leader may not ever be out front, right? And I think that may be a mind exercise for some people, because the assumption is if you're the leader, you're out front. But to be able to, as you was, thinking about when you said appointing people, when I'm able to interact and point people and look at different people from behind, and I can observe what they're doing and so forth, it moves me more to principle.
Yes.
But it doesn't negate personality, right? So I because there's certain people, if I'm delivering this type of message, I want this person to do it, and most definitely, absolutely not that person to do it, or vice versa. So you begin to know and understand, and then you get this real concept of what a working team, if you will, is. And I won't go back to football, but when you get a good working team, everybody knows when they're supposed to shine and when they're not, when they're supposed to step back and when they step up. And when that happens,
you can say it. They don't get blown out in the bowl game. We know what you're thinking. When the team works together, they don't get blown out in the bowl game. We know.
and I mean, for us, we're in a bowl game every day.
Exactly. Folks, we're going to come right back after this message. We want to say thank you to our organizational sponsors and individual donors. We're going to give it back to Z so he can wrap up, and we'll do our final thoughts right after this. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our organizational sponsors and individual donors. It's thanks to folks like you that we're able to share these mighty messages out across the airwaves and all around planet Earth. So thank you for being with us. All right, Z, let's get back into it. I cut you off. I know that the producers were screaming in my ear to get to that commercial break. So final thoughts, wrap us up.
But no, I think, yeah, I think, 2025 is going to be a opportunity for us to learn to lead and follow graciously, right? To be able to, as my mantra song is by Kenny Rogers, you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. We have to begin to understand that. And so when we can do that, I think everything. And I'm sticking to that.
Right on. Dr. Tracy.
Well, closing comments. Okay, so closing thoughts. When we are saying goodbye to 2024, not the best year, not the worst year, just a year. And I want to celebrate. I do want to celebrate some of the insights and some of the collaboration that happened in 2024. When I look at 2025, I want us to get off the drama train. I want us in New Thought to stand in principle and just turn away from the drama triangle where there's victims and villains and heroes. And instead, remember, in the circle of God, there are no sides. It's a circle. And that means that there are different people around the circle who have different skills and are included in what happens in our individual community or in our denomination or in the New Thought movement overall. And I'm going to stop there.
Yeah. As you were sharing, I was reminded of Victoria Castle's Circle of Belonging. This whole conversation for me today has led me back to something that I used to say long ago, that we're really a leadership institute. This is really a teaching about how to be great leaders. And somehow, because right, we don't worship a deity, we don't have incense swinging around maybe some places they do, but right, we don't have the trappings of religion. We somehow took on an identity of church, and we can go back and trace all that stuff in the history of the movement and how all that happened. But it's almost as if, have we kind of missed our calling a little? And are these things we're talking about, crisis in leadership and opportunities, really symptoms of having missed our calling just a little bit? And is it time for this movement to pivot into more of a leadership type of organization? Or is there room for at least one, I guess? So that's a whole nother conversation. And Dr. Tracy, maybe you'll come back and join us on that conversation someday.
I would love to.
We would love to have you. Folks, thanks for being with us. This has been New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. It happens every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. We invite you to come back and join us again sometime. Like, share, subscribe. All of our past episodes are available on our website and on the YouTube channel. Just look under the archives. Until next time, we wish you peace and richest blessings. Bye now.